If you've ever found yourself staring at a shelf full of lenses, wondering which one is actually the right choice for your photos, you're not alone. You need a nifty 50 because it's how your eyes see the world. No. It's all about the 35 to tell award-winning stories. You need an 85 to make your ugly clients look like models. Let me tell you about a new secret versatile lens that can help you shoot everything from a ladybug to a snow leopard. It's the 16 to 600 f1.2. It's very overwhelming and you can't afford or carry all those lenses on every shoot. Choosing the perfect lens can feel overwhelming, but today I'm going to break it down for you. There's a lot of advice out there: prime lenses, zoom lenses, expensive glass, affordable third-party options. That's why in this video, we will talk about how to choose the right lens for you based on your photography style and what you're actually trying to achieve. We'll cover focal lengths, what they actually do without getting too scientific and off in the weeds, and how to pick the perfect one for the shot that you have in mind. Trust me, by the end of this, you'll know exactly which lens to grab for every situation. I'm Brenda Bergreens here with practical tips for you. Let's start with the basics. What is focal length? The focal length of a lens determines how much of a scene you can capture. It's measured in millimeters and it affects both the angle of view and the depth of field. A shorter focal length, like the 24 millimeters, gives you a wide field of view, while a longer focal length, like the 200 millimeter, captures distant subjects and compresses the scene with a narrower depth of field for what's in focus. If you want more information about depth of field and background blur and bokeh, I did a whole video on that you can check out here. For now, I want to talk about why it matters. Simply put, the right focal length will help you tell your story more effectively by choosing how much of the scene is included and how the subject interacts with the background, and even how your subject is framed. Which brings us to choosing the right focal length. So how do you choose which one is right for you? Let's break it down on different types of photography styles and needs. My philosophy is always to get the best gear you can afford, but only if it actually makes a difference in your work. No need to waste money, hard-earned money, on a lens that doesn't pack a lot of value. Be sure to check out our video on how to set a budget for your camera gear, and that will help you determine how much to spend. In this section, I'll walk through focal length choices as well as what your lens feature priorities should be. And then I'll put links to Mark's recommendations for specific lenses for each category in the description. As an FYI, everything I'm going to talk about is in terms of full frame cameras. If you're shooting on a crop sensor camera, you'll need to make the adjustment. So if I say 50, you'll want a 35. It's typically 1.5x the crop sensor focal length to get the equivalent full frame. This can get really confusing, so feel free to ask questions in the comments and we'll help you out. So first up, landscape photography. Let's say you're shooting landscapes. A wide angle lens like the one we're filming on here is your best friend. Something in the 16 to 35 millimeter range or even 24 millimeter gives you that broader field of view. These lenses allow you to capture expansive vistas, sweeping skies, and grand perspectives. When you're out in nature, you want a lens that can take in as much as possible without too much distortion, and these lenses will do just that. Some landscape photographers like to also have a super telephoto so that you can zoom in on distant scenes. One example might be 100 to 400. Personally, I like to have a mid-range or telephoto lens to give me some variety in my images as well, so that not everything is captured on my 16 to 35. Something captured with my 50 is going to be different than something with my 16 shots, adding variety to my work. Now, you likely want a high quality lens, but it doesn't have to be a low aperture lens. Many landscape photographers care more about image quality than having a super fast lens. You can always drop your shutter speed and use a tripod in low light. For example, you might choose the f4 version of your lens because it's cheaper and lighter weight than the f2.8 version. The one exception might be if you're doing astrophotography and need to shoot in low light. We'll talk about that in a later section. Next up is portrait photography. When you're shooting portraits, you're typically looking for a lens that isolates your subject from the background. A 50mm or an 85mm lens is perfect for this because they offer a flattering perspective without distortion. The 85mm gives you that especially creamy bokeh, creating a beautiful separation between your subject and the background while allowing you to keep some environmental context in the shot. 85mm is also the most flattering focal length for facial features, making it great for headshots. The 50mm over here is great for full-length portraits while still giving some background blur. It also allows for more environmental context, which I personally love for outdoor portraits. Some photographers love shooting portraits with the 35mm focal length, which I would say is great for environmental portraits when you're not as close to your subject, therefore minimizing distortion in the facial features. When it comes to portrait photography, you likely want a prime lens because you can get a low aperture prime to maximize bokeh and background separation. The low aperture zoom lenses are more expensive, and I'm not usually in too much of a rush to just swap lenses during a portrait session if I want a different focal length. My How to Shoot with Different Lens series is a great resource if you're trying to learn more on how to shoot with the 35, the 50, the 85. It'll help you walk you through some tips for each of those focal lengths and give you a deeper dive into the benefits of each focal length for a variety of different shooting styles. Next up, let's talk about weddings and event photography. If you're shooting events like weddings or concerts, a 24-70 zoom lens is a fantastic all-around option. It gives you flexibility to go from wide shots of the venue to tighter shots of people with just one lens. You don't want to miss moments, so this lens allows you to move quickly and adapt to any situation. If you watched my last video on how to shoot with the 24-70, you'll know that I've shot prime lenses at weddings for years. I love how compact and lightweight they are and often shoot a 2-camera setup with a 35 and an 85 each on its own camera. Having 2 cameras is part of having backup equipment at a wedding anyway, so I figure I might as well use it, especially with how light my Sony mirrorless cameras are. The main advantage of primes versus the zoom is the low aperture lenses perform better in low light. So if you know you're going to be shooting in dark getting ready rooms and reception halls, that is definitely something to consider. However, you might also have a lighting setup anyway to help deal with low light situations, so you'll have to evaluate what works best for you. The 24-70 is a game changer for hybrid shooters shooting both photo and video because swapping lenses as a photographer is fine, but it's harder to do when shooting video, as you'll have your mic and gimbal attached in balance. So if you're an event photographer, you'll have to determine if your priority is versatility of a zoom or low light performance of a prime. A low aperture zoom lens might break the bank, but I'll link those below too, just in case budget isn't a factor for you. And for the rest of us, be sure to watch this video on how to set a budget for your camera gear. Some event photographers might want a longer zoom lens because they can't get as close to the action, which brings us to wildlife photography, another time where you can't get as close to the action. For wildlife photographers, a longer lens is often required to get close-up shots without disturbing the subject. A 70 to 200mm lens, or preferably longer, can help you isolate your subject and capture those intimate moments from a distance. Most wildlife photographers shoot with a 100 to 400 or a 150 to 600. I don't shoot primarily wildlife photography, but I've captured great shots with my 70 to 200. If wildlife photography is more than a chance encounter, if it was my main focus, I would definitely want something longer. Sigma makes a 60 to 600 that, despite being heavy, offers great image quality and a 10x optical zoom range. With these super zooms, you don't care as much about minimum aperture because you'll still get bokeh simply because of the distance. Instead, you care about image quality, and you probably want stabilization because it's such a long focal length. Next up, let's talk travel and street photography. For travel and street photography, you'll want a standard focal length that allows you to blend in while still capturing the action. It's harder to blend in with a giant lens. 35 millimeters is a great choice. It's wide enough to capture the scene, but not so wide that you lose detail. Plus it's compact and doesn't draw any attention, which is key for candid shots. The 50 millimeter lens also works well for street photography, especially if you want to focus on more intimate moments. Many travelers will want the versatility of a zoom lens because you're carrying fewer things rather than multiple prime lenses. Next, you want to ask yourself what type of photography you shoot when you travel. Are you telling stories of people and places, or are you shooting landscapes and action shots of the beautiful surroundings? We personally always take our 16 to 35 and then something mid-range like a 50 or an 85. Let's move on to astrophotography. For astrophotography, you want a wide angle lens in the 14 millimeter to 24 millimeter range. These lenses are ideal for capturing expansive night skies, constellations, the Milky Way. You definitely want fast aperture lenses, f2.8 or preferably faster. A wider aperture allows more light in, especially for sharp and bright night photos. If you want more information on shooting night photography, check out the post on our blog. I'll link that below as well. Now let's move on to product, food, and macro photography. I'm kind of lumping product, food, and macro photography into one group because you'll pick a lens based on the types of products you're shooting. Macro lenses are perfect for capturing stunning close-up details, whether it's the texture of a product or the intricate features of a flower. Popular choices are in the 50 millimeter or 90 millimeter range. Macro lenses allow you to get close to your subject, which is definitely needed for those smaller subjects. Since we personally don't shoot a lot of macro photography, we just use a 50 or an 85 prime lens for any close-up photography, and it gives us that subject separation and creamy backgrounds. But we can't get as close to the subjects as you would with a macro lens. So if you're doing that, you'll want a macro specific lens. Next up, let's talk about the photographer who says, I don't know, I want to shoot everything, I'm just getting started. So if you're just starting your photography journey, simplicity and versatility are key. Most beginner cameras come with a kit lens, something like an 18 to 55. It's touted as versatile and perfect for learning the basics of composition and focal length. The price is sometimes right, but I actually don't recommend kit lenses as you'll outgrow them quickly and their image quality leaves much to be desired. Instead, I would recommend either the 50 millimeter or a wide angle zoom. The 50 millimeter f1.8, known as the Nifty 50, is affordable, lightweight, and sharp. The lens is excellent for portraits, low light shooting, and just general photography. It's a good value in terms of quality for the price. If you want a zoom, the 24 to 70 is a versatile option. And for wide angle zooms, the 16 to 35 is great for landscapes and group shots. These lenses let you experiment with wide perspectives. If you like taking pictures outside, this can be really fun, and it's one of our favorite and most used lenses. Pro tip is don't rush to buy multiple lenses. Start with one or two versatile options, and then let your style guide your next purchase. Another tip is that if you already have a catalog of images on your computer, filter those images by focal length and see what focal length your favorite shots are at. Maybe this will help you choose your next prime. Or maybe it'll encourage you to shoot with a focal length that you're not used to shooting with. Next up, comparing focal lengths. Now that you have an idea of what focal lengths work best for different styles, let's compare some of the most popular ones. In this section, I'm not talking about a specific lens or zooms versus primes. I'm talking about shooting at various focal lengths. And if this content appeals to you, remember that I have that whole how to shoot video series that you can watch here that walks you through the benefits of different focal lengths, such as the battle of the wide primes, where I compare the 24, 28, and 35 millimeter. For the purpose of this video, I'll keep it a little more general. Approximately 24 millimeters is great for wide scenes, but it might feel a little too wide for portraits because of distortion. 50 is versatile and performs well for a lot of things, but it isn't wide enough if you're in a tight space or if you're trying to capture a vast scene, and it isn't tight enough to get in close on a faraway subject. Then there's 85 millimeters, ideal portrait lens that creates bokeh and compression. 100 millimeters and beyond allows you to photograph far away subjects, but clearly are going to be heavier and more limiting in a tight space. Next, let's talk about choosing based on aperture and distance. So one thing to keep in mind when choosing your lens is the aperture. Lenses with a wider aperture, like f1.8, f2.8, allow you to shoot in lower light and give you a nice depth of field for that blurred background. But be aware, those lenses with large apertures will come at a higher price. So, in summary, the right lens depends on your photography style and the kinds of shots you want to take. For wide scenes, go for something like the 16-35 or the 24. For intimate portraits, 50 or 85 is your best bet. And if you want an all-around lens that can do it all, you can't go wrong with the 24-70 zoom. So take the time to figure out what kind of photographer you are, and that will guide you towards the right focal length and lenses for you. No one lens can do it all, but choosing the right one for the right moment can make a huge difference in your photography. You can always rent a lens to try out a focal length and see if you like it. I hope this video helped clear up some of the confusion around lens selection. Let me know in the comments what lens you use the most, or if you have any questions about focal lengths. And don't forget to subscribe for more photography tips. Next up, check out my video on how to shoot with the 24-70. I'll see you over there.